A tour of the White House with Mrs. John F. Kennedy. Created and produced by CBS News for the CBS Television Network.
This is the White House, as seen from its south lawn. For the next hour, Mrs. John F. Kennedy invites you to visit the President's house and see some of the restorations she's made in its interior. I'm Charles Collingwood. Theodore Roosevelt, who also restored the White House, once wrote, "The White House is the property of the nation, and so far as is compatible with living therein, it should be kept as it originally was. It's a good thing to preserve such buildings which keep alive our sense of continuity with the nation's past." Our nation's past is reflected in a small part by the history of the walls of the White House. Before Mrs. Kennedy meets us and guides us through the White House, herewith her personal narrative of the early days of the President's house.
This sketch, made in 1799, before the White House was completed, shows that the original design of the building included an extra floor. George Washington, for reasons of economy, persuaded the architect to eliminate the top floor. This is the final design of the White House, as planned by James Hoban. Mr. Hoban won an open competition for the first public building in Washington. It wasn't until after Thomas Jefferson's death that it was learned that President Jefferson had entered a design anonymously into the competition and lost. President Jefferson's design was for a smaller house. He thought Hoban's mansion was big enough for 2 emperors and the Grand Lama. Abigail Adams was the first president's wife to live in the White House. She complained of the dampness and cold. Mrs. Adams kept the house habitable only by building fires in every room. The British added to the flames by burning the White House on the night of August 24, 1814. The president's house was a blackened ruin and had to be almost completely rebuilt. The famous American artist George Catlin made this sketch of the north side of the White House, showing it as it must have appeared about 1820. The south portico, by Benjamin Latrobe, was added in 1824, and the columns made the White House seem grander. Still, there are sheep grazing and a vegetable patch on the south lawn. In 1829, the north portico, also by Latrobe, was added. This was the view from Pennsylvania Avenue. By 1840, one of the many storms broke concerning the decorating of the White House. Congressman Ogle attacked President Van Buren, asking, "Will Americans support their chief servant in a palace as splendid as the Caesars?" Charles Dickens didn't find the White House quite that splendid. He called it an English clubhouse with that uncomfortable air of having been made yesterday. Many times there wasn't enough money for even minor repairs. The paint peeled from the walls, and the building was known as the public shabby house. As America grew and the president's responsibilities grew, the offices took over more and more of the building. Mrs. Harrison complained that she had no privacy. She submitted this plan for an enlargement of the building, adding 2 large wings to contain offices and entertainment rooms. Her plans were not approved. This photograph was taken on New Year's Day, 1898. McKinley was president, and he was observing a custom which persisted until Herbert Hoover. New Year's Day was traditionally an open house when anyone could come to the White House and shake the president's hand. The south lawn was a jumble of greenhouses, and the interior was an impossible arrangement of the president's private quarters and executive offices. In 1902, President Roosevelt ordered out the clutter and built 2 temporary extensions, which became permanent office wings. Though Theodore Roosevelt's interior designs were classically beautiful, the work was done in such a rush that severe structural damage was done to the building. In 1924, Mrs. Coolidge redid the interior and added 18 rooms to the 3rd floor. Her work was necessary, but again, the structure was heavily stressed by the haphazard construction. The bill for damages was presented in 1948. President Truman became concerned because the floor of his study was vibrating. An investigation was held, and the structural weaknesses of the White House became immediately apparent. One of the investigators said, "The building is standing up purely from force of habit." The beams under Margaret Truman's sitting room had split. The building was too dangerous for occupancy. The White House was taken apart like a jigsaw puzzle. The pieces were marked and stored away. The whole inside was scooped out. Only the exterior walls were left standing. Steel beams were rigged in the interior. It was a little difficult to get the new steel beams through the windows designed by Mr. Hoban in 1790. It would have been easier and less expensive to demolish the whole building. But the White House is so great a symbol to Americans that the exterior walls were retained. Then piece by piece, the interior of the president's house was put back together. The exterior views were exactly those which Americans had seen throughout this century, except for the balcony on the south portico, which President Truman added.
Mrs. John F. Kennedy, 3rd youngest of the 29 wives to live in the White House. Mrs. Kennedy, I want to thank you for letting us visit your official home. This is obviously the room from which much of your work on it is directed.
Yes, it's attic and cellar all in one. Since our work started, we've received hundreds of letters every day. This is where we evaluate all the finds, see if we want to keep them, if they fit into our budget.
Mrs. Kennedy, every First Lady and every administration since President Madison's time has made changes, greater or smaller, in the White House. Before we look at any of the changes you've made, what's your basic plan?
Well, I really don't have one, because I think this house will always grow and should. It just seemed to me such a shame when we came here to find hardly anything of the past in the house, hardly anything before 1902. I know when we went to Columbia, the presidential palace there has all the history of that country in it, where Simon Bolivar was. Every piece of furniture in it has some link with the past. I thought the White House should be like that.
Well, now, can you make these changes according to your own personal tastes and desires?
Well, no, I have a committee which has museum experts and government people and private citizens on it. And then everything we do is subject to approval by the Fine Arts Committee.
What's your budget? Where does it come from?
Well, it really, it's small, because everything we do is by private donation. And every time we find an object we want, then we have to go and search for a donor. It's very slow, and that way a lot of things that we would like to get slip away from us.
Now, suppose that you and your committee were to acquire some of the things that are in this room. What happens when the next president's wife comes into the White House?
Well, if they don't want it, in the past, you see, they could sell it, throw it out, do anything with it they wanted. But then a law was passed last spring, which we asked to have passed, whereby everything that's given to or bought by the White House becomes part of its permanent collection. If a future First Family doesn't want it, it goes to the Smithsonian, where it will be taken care of and displayed.
Now, if you'll forgive me, this room looks a little bit like an antique dealer's dream. Have you made any good finds lately?
Well, we have. This chest is rather interesting. As you know, the thing we care about most is something that belonged to a past president. This little chest was left by President Van Buren to his grandson. It has writing inside it, which shows all that. And this, as we like to have mainly American furniture and things, is rather like Staffordshire, but it's American pottery, which is very rare, of the early 19th century, with an eagle and the shield on it. So, those are two rather nice finds.
They are indeed. Well, now we've seen some of the ingredients for some of the new furnishings in the White House. Could we see a completed room?
Yes, the diplomatic reception room is right here, if you'd like to see that.
What is the diplomatic reception room used for besides receiving diplomats?
Well, it's the room that people see first when they come to the White House. Everyone who comes to a state dinner here comes through it and leaves by it. So I think it should be a pretty room.
It's the way I came in, and it's a beautiful room. The wallpaper is magnificent.
Yes, this is wallpaper that was printed in France about 1834. It's all scenes of America. Niagara Falls, New York Harbor, Indians, West Point. I think the colors are marvelous.
They are. When was it printed?
In the beginning of the 19th century.
And does most of the rest of the furniture in the room come from that same time?
Yes, very much that period. It's all quite unified in this room.
Those are beautiful wing chairs over there.
They are pretty. They're rather interesting because they're American, as is all the furniture in this room, made in New England about 160 years ago. Mrs. Eisenhower brought all this superb furniture into this room. We added the wallpaper.
Speaking of making things, I understand that you've turned one part of this floor into a furniture shop. Is that right?
That's true. It used to be the kitchen years and years ago. Then it was a broadcast room under Franklin Roosevelt. President Truman used it to show movies. And now we have an upholstery shop here where we do all our furniture restoring and upholstering.
Do you do all of the reupholstering of these old pieces in here?
We do mostly. It's much quicker and more practical. It's so exciting to see things grow every day. And then also in this room, we have 3 ladies on loan to us from the National Park Service who catalog every single item in the White House, so we'll be sure nothing is lost track of again. All donors will be given credit in a booklet that everyone can see.
There are a lot of other rooms in this particular part of the White House. Are there any that we really need to see?
Well, there's the China room and the gold room and the library, which isn't finished yet. I think the first 2 are so well known that it would be better to go upstairs where the rooms there are of so much greater interest. Since we're going to the East Room next, perhaps its history will give you some idea of the evolution of a single room. The East Room was originally intended as an audience room, something like the throne room in European palaces, used for funerals, weddings, meetings with American Indians and other dignitaries. The East Room gradually became associated in the American mind as the place for the grand events in the White House. The artists made the East Room seem larger and larger and raised the ceiling higher and higher until it resembled the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles. Here, from Leslie's chimney corner, the dignitaries of the Civil War are greeted by President Lincoln. Nobody smiles, and everybody but President Lincoln is frozen upright. The artist left a respectful amount of carpet showing. Mary Lincoln had spent a lot of money for the carpet, and her husband was angry. The center figure is Vice President Johnson. And this, the earliest photograph, is the East Room in President Johnson's time. When General Grant became President Grant, He put false, elaborate timbers across the ceiling and furnished the room in a style crossing ancient Greece with what someone called Mississippi riverboat. The predominant feature became 3 cut-glass chandeliers. Under Presidents Arthur and McKinley, more and more potted palms were placed into the room until it looked like a jungle. This is the East Room, just before Theodore Roosevelt ordered his changes. Theodore Roosevelt's renovation. The rug, the timbers, and most of the potted palms were discarded. The room is simple and classic. Roosevelt used it for his state functions, and he once had a jiu-jitsu exhibition there. After Theodore Roosevelt, the potted palms came into the East Room once more, but there were no major changes in this room from 1902 to the present. President Truman raised the chandeliers and reduced them slightly in size.
Well, Mrs. Kennedy, this is the East Room pretty much as Americans have known it now for 60 years. Obviously, you haven't felt that you had to make any great changes in it.
No, I think it's lovely. I hate to make changes, really, so when you find a room like this, it's wonderful.
This piano brings to mind that this is the part of the White House where you have the musical affairs.
That's right. This piano was designed by Franklin Roosevelt with the eagle supports. And this is the end of the room where Pablo Casals played for us, where we had a portable stage built when we had the Shakespeare players.
Mrs. Kennedy, this administration has shown a particular affinity for artists, musicians, writers, poets. Is this because you and your husband just feel that way, or do you think that there's a relationship between the government and the arts?
That's so complicated. I don't know. I just think that everything in the White House should be the best, the entertainment that's given here. And if it's an American company that you can help, I like to do that. If it's not, just as long as it's the best.
Isn't that the famous Gilbert Stuart portrait of George Washington?
That's right. That's the oldest thing in the White House, the only thing that was here since the very beginning. The government set a rather interesting precedent when that picture was painted. They commissioned the finest living artist of the day to paint the president, and then they gave it as a gift to the White House. I often wish they'd followed that, because so many pictures of later presidents are by really inferior artists. There is another Gilbert Stuart portrait of Washington in the cabinet room. It was given by the Charles Paysons in memory of their son.
Is there anything else of great historical interest in this room?
Well, there's more about this picture, which is rather interesting. Gilbert Stuart painted the head from life, and then the body was painted by people in his atelier, which was a common practice in the 18th century. And then Dolly Madison, when the White House was burned by the British in 1814, managed to save it, along with a cartload of furniture and documents, which have been invaluable to us in our research.
I think that is of historical interest.
Yes, and so were these Monroe candelabra. They were down in the gold room, but we put them up here so that now almost every room on this floor has a Monroe candelabra on the mantelpiece. You see, after the White House was burned, Monroe, who came back in 1817, had to refurnish it. So he bought all these superb bronzes in France. They're on the mantel now in the green room, the blue room, and in the state dining room is perhaps the most famous of all, the Monroe centerpiece. Masses and masses of gold and glass, which he bought in France.
This is the corridor that leads across the White House to the state dining room.
That's right. I rather love this hall. It has all the colors one thinks of when one thinks of the White House. Red and white and blue and gold. It also has 4 of the best American pictures which have been loaned to us for the White House, including the only other Gilbert Stuart of John Barry, who founded the Navy.
Well, this is the part of the White House that most people think of as the main entrance, the one on Pennsylvania Avenue.
That's right. It's through this door that all the heads of state come. And this is where the president meets them. And here's where the Marine Band plays. They have ruffles and flourishes. Then hail to the chief. And then there's a receiving line. And then everyone goes into dinner here in the state dining room. This is the same entrance as it was in 1881 when President Arthur had it redone. This was before the time of central heating. And to keep the drafts out, Chester Arthur commissioned Louis Tiffany to build this elaborate glass screen. It may have kept the wind out of the White House, but the screen kept the main corridor dark. This is the corridor we just passed through, about 1887. The doors lead to the state dining room. The state dining room. Early presidents often faced attack on their dinners and services. The men who came from the old frontier often found it all too elaborate. The food is hardly fit to eat, wrote one visitor. I would prefer they serve fried meat and gravy, or hog and hominy. This is the state dining room again, as it was during the time of Benjamin Harrison and his wife Caroline. The 1902 renovation. The room has been simplified by the great architect Stamford White. Theodore Roosevelt hung his stuffed animal heads around the room. There's a story that President Wilson so disliked these stuffed heads that he always seated himself in such a manner that he would not see them while dining. Originally, the state dining room would hold only 50 or 60 people. But just outside, there used to be a stairway leading to the upper floor. This staircase and hall were eliminated in 1902. The whole area was incorporated into the state dining room. The capacity of the room was more than doubled. The work was so successful that no one has made any basic changes in this room since 1902.
This state dining room symbolizes your duties as an official hostess. Do you serve many meals here?
Yes, this is where all the state dinners and lunches are given. Can seat 102 people, though the table now is not set up for that many.
Are there many state dinners?
Yes, there are. There were almost 2 a month last year.
Tell me about the silverware and the china, Mrs. Kennedy.
Well, it's not silver, it's all gold or vermeil. They used to use Monroe's knives and forks, but so many of them have been lost, so they've been copied. And the china is the Eisenhower gold china. You see, so many of the beautiful old services the presidents had were destroyed and broken, so now the Truman and the Eisenhower china is all that there's enough left of to use. And there is the beautiful Monroe centerpiece and his flower or fruit baskets and candelabra, all brought from France in 1817. And these glasses, they're ours. I wanted a very simple design so that the china and silver and glass would show up more. So I looked all over, and the prettiest ones I found came from West Virginia.
Well, they are beautiful.
And then this tablecloth is new. It's a gift to the White House from the firm of Porto. And it's all embroidered in gold to match the centerpiece and the knives and forks.
And these pictures, there are 3 of them in this room, the 2 behind us here.
Yes, these 2 are on loan from the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. All 3 pictures in this room are by Healy. There's Thomas Jefferson, a copy after Stewart. And then there's Daniel Webster, who didn't live here, but he visited the White House for 40 years. And then the most famous one of all is this one of Abraham Lincoln, which traditionally always hung in the state dining room. Healy was a contemporary of Lincoln, but he only saw him once, so he painted this picture from photographs. And you can see 2 damaged spots on it, really quite bad ones. So we hope soon to have all the pictures in the White House that need repair repaired.
This is a perfectly beautiful room. Have you changed it a great deal?
No, we painted it white. This room's interesting because it has the most architectural unity of any room in the White House. It's really all 1902, when Theodore Roosevelt did the great restoration with Stamford White and his firm, McKim White. The architecture, the consoles with the eagles, the furniture, the chandelier and the appliques. And it's interesting, people always think of Theodore Roosevelt with his stuffed animals and things. Few people realize that he was second only to Thomas Jefferson in his care and knowledge about the White House. In fact, he designed the one thing which is missing here, but which will soon be given to us, a superb mantle. McKim White had designed one with lions' heads, and Theodore Roosevelt said, no, the lion's not an American animal. So he designed it with buffalo heads of white marble, and McKim White now is copying that for us. So you'll soon see it here to replace this just simple molding that was put in 1948.
And Mrs. Kennedy, on that fireplace, just under the mantel, there's an inscription which I found one of the most moving things in the White House.
Yes, that's from the very first letter that was ever written from the White House. It was written by John Adams, the first president to live here, to his wife Abigail, when he'd only been here 2 days, in November 2nd, 1800. And in it says, I pray heaven to bestow the best of blessings on this house and on all that shall hereafter inhabit it. May none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof. It was Franklin Roosevelt who loved that prayer and had it put on the mantelpiece.
Thank you, Mrs. Kennedy. Can we take a moment now to talk about some of the pictures which are not yet hung?
We've set up a committee to acquire American paintings for the White House, and in a short time they've accomplished wonders. First, the portrait of Benjamin Franklin by David Martin, the only one of Franklin ever painted from life in 1767 in London, when Franklin was 60 years old. It's the gift of Mr. and Mrs. Walter Annenberg of Philadelphia, and it will hang in the green room over the mantel. And here is a portrait of Alexander Hamilton by John Trumbull, one of the greatest American painters. It's the gift of Mr. and Mrs. Henry Ford of Grosse Pointe, Michigan. I think it will probably hang in the red room. Here are 3 landscapes which will hang in the green room. A Mountain Glimpse, 1854, by Jasper Cropsey, given by Mrs. A.S. Chisholm of Cleveland. Niagara Falls by John Kenseth, given by Mr. and Mrs. James Fosberg of New York. Kenseth was the most influential artist in popularizing landscape painting in this country. Indian Guides, 1830, by Alvin Fisher, gift of the Nathaniel Saltonstall Arts Fund of Boston. Here are 5 superb still lifes which will hang in the family dining room. Grapes and Apples by James Peale, and Still Life by Rubens Peale. The Peales were a great family of American painters. These 2 are by Severin Rosen. Brute, painted in 1851. Another still life, Nature's Bounty, a gift of Mr. and Mrs. Wickersham June and Mrs. Kaplan of New York. And this beautiful still life of vegetables by William Chase, gift of Mrs. Suzette Morton Zurcher of Chicago. And last are 2 marine scenes. Naval Battle of 1812 by Huggins, the gift of Mrs. Marshall Field from the collection of her husband. And Mouth of the Delaware by Thomas Birch, 1828.
Suppose we take a moment now to orient ourselves.
This is the White House as seen from the South Lawn. We're in the state dining room on the left of the screen, hidden behind the trees. There are 3 rooms which serve as reception rooms for the smaller official functions of the White House. The Red Room. Behind these walls, after the death of Willie Lincoln, Mrs. Lincoln consulted mediums and prevailed upon her husband to attend one seance. The the Blue Room. Until recent times, this was the room where presidents received the credentials of foreign ambassadors to the United States. The Green Room. This used to be the dining room, and here Jefferson gave his famous dinners and introduced such exotic foods as macaroni, waffles, and ice cream to the United States.
Mrs. Kennedy, I know that after a dinner in the state dining room, it's customary to withdraw to the Red Room. May we?
Yes, it's right here. It's one of the rooms that's used the most, so I'd like to show you what we've done to it. But before we go to the Red Room, you should look at this pier table. It's Empire, and it belonged to Joseph Bonaparte, Napoleon's brother, who came here after Waterloo. He lived in Bordentown, New Jersey, and had lots of his beautiful furniture with him. And his furniture was very important in transferring the French Empire style to America. This is lent to us by the Philadelphia Museum.
Oh, this is the most brilliant of the rooms that we've seen. I can see why they call it the Red Room. What is the fabric?
It's silk with a scroll border of gold. It's copied from an American Empire document. Everything in this room is Empire because the style of the room is dictated by the mantelpiece, which is Empire. This is one of the only two remaining mantels in the White House from 1817, after the fire. All the ones before were burned, and all the others in the house are either 1902 or 48. You see, it has the same Egyptian columns as the pier table we saw in the hall. That was because of Napoleon's Egyptian campaign and his desire to think of himself as a Roman emperor, have very heavy things.
That's American Empire in furniture, not in politics.
That's right. Then this room has a beautiful carpet.
Which of these pieces have historical associations?
Well, there are quite a few. This is Dolly Madison's sofa. That's Nellie Custis's sofa, George Washington's granddaughter. The most interesting are the pair of chairs by the desk. Not many people know that Mrs. Lincoln sold a lot of furniture after her husband's death because she was destitute. A lot that she'd bought and a lot of earlier furniture. Those chairs are way before Lincoln, either Van Buren or Tyler. And one of the ways that we get most of our furniture back is the people who got things at that sale. Those were a gift of Mrs. Edith McGinnis of Falls Church. I must say the generosity of those people is what makes us still have things that come back. So we're very lucky and grateful.
I know that all the rooms in the White House have historical associations, but this room, next to the state dining room, must have been used so often. A great many things must have happened here.
Yes, one thing that's interesting, President Hayes was sworn in here as president secretly at night because his was the closest election there ever was. And they didn't want the United States to be without a president for even a day. So while everyone was having dinner, they swore him in here.
These pictures are good, too. That one behind you is a Civil War picture. Has that been in the White House long?
No. Well, that's the picture that my committee to get pictures for the White House found for here. It's wonderful. It has such historic interest. Civil War Maneuvers by Wordsworth Thompson. It depicts the action at Edwards Ferry in Balls Bluff, Virginia, in October 1861. I feel so strongly that the White House should have as fine a collection of American pictures as possible. It's so important, the setting in which the presidency is presented to the world, to foreign visitors, and American people should be proud of it. We had such a great civilization that so many foreigners don't realize it. This little table, for instance, it's by Lanouillet, and a French cabinet maker who came to America. Not many people know of him. He was just as good as Duncan Fife or as great French cabinet makers. All the things we did so well, pictures, furniture, I think that this house should be the place where you can see them the best.
And that's what your committee is doing?
That's what they're trying to do.
Mrs. Kennedy, I think the next room along here is the Blue Room, is it not?
That's right. It's right along this way. And on the way in, this is interesting. It's Lafayette's March, composed and printed in 1824. He came here on a triumphal tour when he was an old man. The whole country went wild about him, wrote poems, made up songs. This is one of them. It's the same period as the room, so we put it there.
Oh, this has a very different feeling than the Red Room.
Yes, it's blue, but you know, under President Monroe, it used to be red.
Is this a date of Monroe's? Is this of his period?
Yes, this room is, everything in it really is from the time of President Monroe. The most fascinating thing is this pier table and bust. When we first came here and started searching for old things, we found the pier table in the carpenter shop where it was being used as a sawhorse. And we recognized it from old engravings. So we took us 6 weeks to restore it and put it back. And then in the men's room downstairs, we found that bust of Washington, which is very primitive. Yes, both sides of his face look different. It was done by an early sculptor. But the interesting thing is, these two pieces are exactly where Monroe had them in the room, which we also learned from studying old engravings.
What is this room used for, Mrs. Kennedy?
It's the most formal room in the White House. It's really not used for anything except receiving lines or... so all it needs is a table and some beautiful chairs, more to look at than to sit in.
Well,
the interesting thing about the chairs is that when the picture of the pier table came in the paper, Miss Catherine Boland of Villanova, Pennsylvania, sent us a chair because she recognized that it went with it. It's the only one of the originals that Monroe ordered from Bélanger in Paris. So Charles Francis Adams, who's a descendant of Adams, the Adams presidents, and who's on my committee, had all the others copied. So now this room looks as it did under Monroe.
You have a wonderful big window here at the end.
Yes, the view from here is so pretty. You can see the Washington Monument. The interesting thing is that this window used to be the door in the olden days. All the carriages would come to the south entrance and people would come up the stairs because Pennsylvania Avenue wasn't paved until the Civil War. This is where they all came in.
And over on the mantel here, Mrs. Kennedy, is this a Monroe piece as well?
Yes, this is the Minerva clock and candelabra, which Monroe also bought from Paris for this room. So you see everything in it really, except the mantel, which is 1902, is Monroe.
Well, it's a very handsome room. And the next one in line is
the green room.
Could we see it?
Yes, it's right this way.
What's the period of this room, Mrs. Kennedy?
It's what an American parlor would have looked like at the time of Adams and Jefferson, a room dating about 1800. When we came, these were the only two antique pieces of furniture in the room, this pair of card tables. And as we hate to change, we decided that we would let them dictate the style of the room. But the funny thing about them is, you know, Henry DuPont, who's the chairman of my committee and established Winter Tour, he noticed them right away and said, "These are the only good things in the room. I wonder who gave them." It turned out it was his sister, Mrs. Crowninshield.
What other objects of special interest are there in the room now?
Well, there's this sofa, which belonged to Daniel Webster and is really one of the finest pieces here in this room. And then there's this mirror. It was George Washington's, and he had it in the Executive Mansion in Philadelphia. Then he gave it to a friend, and it was bought for Mount Vernon in 1891. And it was there until Mount Vernon lent it to us this fall. And I must say, I appreciate that more than I can say, because when Mount Vernon, which is probably the most revered house in this country, lends something to the White House, you know they have confidence that it will stay here and be taken care of.
And that's a magnificent desk under it.
Yes, that has a fascinating story, too. That was our first piece of unsolicited fine furniture. One day, Mrs. Maurice Noun from Des Moines, Iowa, came into the curator's office and asked us if we would like to have it. It turns out there are only 4 like it in existence in the Metropolitan and Winterthur, and Maryland Historical Institute. It's a Baltimore lady's desk made only in Baltimore, classical with sandalwood inlay and Eglo-Mise panels, which is gold painting on glass. It's really a treasure, and I wish there were more people like Mrs. Noun, because it was hard to get people to part with fine furniture.
One of the nicest things in this room, to my untutored eye, is that portrait of a beautiful young lady over the fireplace.
You're right. It's one of the best pictures in the White House. It's Angelica Van Buren, who was a Southern girl, Van Buren's daughter-in-law. She was his hostess. It's by Henry Inman. It really is terribly good.
Is that Van Buren himself in the picture there, the bust?
That's a bust of him, yes, which is another one we found that's downstairs, you may have seen. And on the mantel, again, is the Monroe Hannibal clock and the 2 vases.
Well, Mrs. Kennedy, we've now seen the state rooms of the White House, but the Lincoln room is upstairs. Could we see that?
Yes, that's a very special room. You should see that.
Well, this staircase goes up to the 2nd floor, which I know are reserved for the private living of the president and his family. I don't think any television cameras or motion picture cameras have ever gone up there, because that's where you live. But in President Lincoln's day, the offices were there.
That's right. I'm glad they're not now. In Lincoln's time, the stairway to his office was always crowded with friends, job seekers, cronies. They climbed the stairs and came down the stairs, having had their moment with the president. Here is what the White House did to President Lincoln. Here is how he changed. 1861, 1863, 1864, 1865, 1861. The strong man with the arched eyebrow. 1865, 1 week before his assassination.
Mrs. Kennedy, do you spend a great deal of time in the Lincoln room?
We did in the beginning. It was where we lived when we first came here, when our rooms at the other end of the hall were being painted. I loved living in this room. It's on the sunny side of the house, and one of Andrew Jackson's magnolia trees is right outside the window.
It's a nice room. Was this a bedroom during Lincoln's time?
No, it was Lincoln's cabinet room. It's President Truman, who's such a scholar of American history, who turned it into a shrine to Lincoln and took the Lincoln furniture that had been all over the house and put it in this room.
Are all the pieces from Lincoln's time?
Yes, they are. The most famous one, of course, is the Lincoln bed. Every president seemed to love it. Theodore Roosevelt slept in it. So did Calvin Coolidge. It's probably the most famous piece of furniture in the White House. It was bought by Mrs. Lincoln, along with the dressing bureaus and chair and this table. She bought a lot of furniture for this house, which made her husband rather cross because he thought she spent too much money. But this table was also loved by Mrs. Theodore Roosevelt. She wrote to McKim, Mead, and White and told them to be sure and stain the furniture and the rest of her bedroom the same color as this table.
It's quite a table. Is that all carving?
Yes, it is. Fantastic Victorian carving. And on the table is the Gettysburg Address. This is probably the greatest treasure in the room, because it's one of only 5 copies written in his own hand. Yellow paper has been kept over it so it won't fade. And also in this room is where Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
On the desk?
No, not on that desk. That desk was in the Soldiers' Home, where he used to go as sort of a summer retreat in Washington or to telegraph. And this sofa and the 2 chairs were brought here through the efforts of President Truman They were sold in that Lincoln sale I was telling you about, that Mrs. Lincoln sold, and they went to England. And then through descendants of the man who bought them there, President Truman got them back from them.
All sorts of detective work have gone into finding these pieces and identifying them, haven't they?
I know. These two chairs are an example of that. We found one at Fort Washington, which is the storehouse, so battered, all the stuffing coming out, but we just thought it looked of the Lincoln period, so we dragged it home, and we found from an engraving that it was. And then out of the blue, a Mrs. Millard Black of Arlington sent us its exact pair. And then a Mrs. Burton Cohen from New Jersey sent us some Victorian green and yellow Morris velvet, and there was just enough to cover the two chairs. So here they are, Lincoln's chairs.
Is that dressing bureau with the mirror part of the original Lincoln furniture? Because it's a marvelously masculine piece.
Yes, that was one of the things that Mrs. Lincoln bought. Almost everything in this room is, except that mirror, which was bought about 1870, and I think it's been all over the house. The last we know of it was in the blue room over the Monroe Pier table in McKinley's time.
What's the picture of Andrew Jackson doing in the Lincoln room?
Oh, well, you see, Lincoln loved Andrew Jackson, and from an old engraving we found that when this was his cabinet room, he had that picture hanging in it. So when we found that out, we took the picture, which was downstairs, and put it in the same place that he'd had it. And the two chairs under it were also bought in the time of Jackson, but Lincoln used them as his cabinet chairs. There are only 4 left now, but because this was his cabinet room, we keep the chairs here.
Well, if this was his cabinet room, Mrs. Kennedy, where was his office?
His office was next door. In his day, you could walk through to it without coming out in the hall, because the hall was always crowded with office seekers. They really plagued him, and to escape them, he would just slip through the door.
So this whole wing was an office wing for a long time in the White House?
Yes, until Theodore Roosevelt built the office buildings in 1902.
Mrs. Kennedy, I've often heard this room referred to as the Monroe Room. How did you get that name?
It just came to be called that. It was Lincoln's office and Johnson's cabinet room. Then when it was used as an upstairs sitting room, Mrs. Hoover had 3 pieces of Monroe's furniture copied in the 1920s that were in his law office. But if you notice the inscription on this mantelpiece, it says this room was first used for meetings of the cabinet during the administration of President Johnson, and continued to be so used until the year 1902. Here the Treaty of Peace with Spain was signed. You see, this was the cabinet room from Johnson to Theodore Roosevelt. Johnson thought there was bad luck associated with using Lincoln's cabinet room after his assassination and everything, so he moved the cabinet in here. This room is really a chamber of horrors now, but I thought it would be interesting for you to see what a room is like when we're starting to do it, because practically all the furniture in this room we found in storage, so battered that there were cries of disbelief when I brought it home. But when this room is finished, you'll see how impressive it will be. This sofa, for instance, was ordered by President Grant, as was this table. And at Grant's cabinet table, there's a drawer for every member of the cabinet. He would lock it up and take the key with him before the next meeting.
What about the chairs, Mrs. Kennedy? I mean, the chairs around the cabinet table.
Those were Grant's ballroom chairs, which were in the White House in different rooms. Then from old engravings, we found that they were also used as Rutherford Hayes dining room chairs. We put them here. That desk is a gift to this room from Mrs. Walter Gartner of South Wellfleet, Mass. It was Grant's wife's desk, Julia Grant. She gave it to us. That's Grant's clock on it. This chair is interesting. It's the one that the Healy portrait of Lincoln in the dining room was painted on.
And you recognized it from the portrait?
Yes, we recognized it from the picture. This mirror, which is broken in pieces, as you can see, we're going to put in the red room when we get it fixed. It's 1830, Andrew Jackson. Shouldn't be up here now, but This is the room where all the clutter comes.
And on the walls there, I see you're trying out wallpaper, is that it?
This is samples from documents of old wallpaper that was once in the White House. Sometimes we get a little scrap of it, or we find it in a book. This isn't from the White House, but that's the border of paper in the room where Lincoln died, across from Ford's Theater. Everything here has been in the White House at some time, and the thing that we're going to do that's going to be interesting is so many treaties have been signed in this room. The archives are going to give us copies of them all, and we're going to frame them and have them all around the walls so that you can really see. This is such a historic room.
What are you going to use it for when you get it all finished?
Well, I do think every room should have a purpose, and it can still be a sitting room because that sofa, though you may not believe it, will look nice, but it will serve a definite purpose. My husband has so many meetings up here in this part of the house. All the men who wait to see him now sit in the hall with baby carriages going by them, so they can sit in here and have a conference around this table waiting for him.
Well, he's going to come in and see us in a few minutes.
Yes, he's terribly interested in this room because, as I say, every piece has a story, and he's watched each one as it came along and as we found out what it was.
President. Well, Mrs.
Collingwood?
Mrs. Kennedy has been showing us about the White House and all the changes that she's made therein. What do you think of the changes that she's made?
Well, I think the great effort that she's made has been to bring us much more intimately in contact with all the men who lived here. And after all, history is people, and particularly in great moments of our history, presidents. So when we have, as we do today, Grant's table, Lincoln's bed, Monroe's gold set, all these make these men much more alive. So I think it makes the White House a stronger panorama, really, of our great story.
Do you mind living in a house that has as many visitors as this one has?
Well, last year we had the largest in history, which I think shows that the White House is becoming more and more important to American people. Over 1,300,000 people pass through our home. But I'd like to see that number doubled this year. And what is particularly interesting is that at least 2/3 of them were young boys and girls at school. I have always felt that American history is sometimes a dull subject. There's so much emphasis on dates. But I think if they can come here and see alive this building and in a sense, touch the people who've been here, then they'll go home more interested, and I think that they'll become better Americans. And some of them may want to someday live here themselves, which I think would be very good, even the girls.
Well, certainly there's a great deal for them to see. Do you, living here as you do, have the same lively sense of the past and of history that those of us who visit this house do?
Oh, yes, I think even more, because over in the executive wing, which you didn't visit, which Theodore Roosevelt designed, I sit at a desk which was given by Queen Victoria to President Hayes, was used by many of our presidents, and the whole atmosphere touches the lives of these men who led our nation in very difficult times. Of course, I think anyone who comes to the White House as a president desires the best for his country, but I think he does receive stimulus from the knowledge of living in close proximity to the people who are legendary, but who actually were alive and were in these rooms.
You feel then that history can be helpful to understanding the present?
Yes, history isn't a guide to the present. In the Archives building down Pennsylvania Avenue, there's a stone plaque which says, "What is past is prologue." While it doesn't give us a key to the future, I think it does give us a sense of confidence in the future. This country has passed through very difficult days, but it has passed through them. And it is rather interesting to realize that we're rather an old republic, probably the oldest republic in the world. And when we were founded, there was a king in France, a czar in Russia, an emperor in Peking. All that's been wiped away, and yet this country continues. So that it makes us feel that we'll continue in the future, and that we represent a long effort building on the lives of the men and the efforts of the men who were here and of the American people in the past. So I consider the history to be a source of, our history to be a source of strength to us here in the White House and to all the American people. And anything which dramatizes the great story of the United States, as I think the White House does, is worthy of the closest attention and respect by Americans who live here and who visit here and who are part of our citizenry. And that's why I'm glad that Jackie is making the effort she's making, and I know other First Ladies have done it, and I know that those who come after us will continue to try to make this the center, really, of, in a sense, of American historical life.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, Mrs. Kennedy, for showing us this wonderful house in which you live and all of the wonderful things that you're bringing to it.